must have been about 11:30 or 12 o'clock. Suddenly there was a Tannoy went and it was yellow section scramble, patrol Dover Dungeness at age of 20. So the three of us set off and arrived. We were patrolling up and down between Dover and Dungeness. And it was, my leader was shot down, a chap called Tennis Norman, and he was very badly burnt, but he survived, although he was killed later in the war. Sergeant Ridley, who was a great friend of mine whom I'd flown with a lot of it, he was killed. And I got a bullet in my leg. I was flying along and suddenly felt pain in my leg, and the propeller stopped.
They'd shot through the plane and it had hit your leg?
Yes, the bullet went underneath the armour plating at the back of the seat.
Right.
And came in underneath and right into my ankle. And the propeller stopped. I tried to jump. I pulled back the hood and tried to jump. But I'd still got my helmet on, of course, which was plugged into the intercom, which pulled me back. So I then had to take my helmet off and jumped. And I wasn't taking any chances. I pulled the ripcord straight away. And I was very high. And the extraordinary thing was that whilst suddenly the air had been filled with aircraft, as I floated down, there wasn't I never saw a single plane.
Did you see, as you were coming down, did you see your own plane ditch?
No, but another pilot told me later that he saw my plane going down into the sea. But he must have been with another flight that must have been scrambled later. I never questioned him about it. Anyway, it was 10 tenths cloud. I hadn't a clue where I was. And eventually I reached the clouds and went through. I was horrified to find that I was over the sea. So I thought, well, gosh, I'd better take my fly boots off. So I managed to reach down, took them off. And I could see them spiralling down for what seemed to be ages. So I realised I was very much higher than I thought I was. And eventually I landed in the sea and got rid of my parachute. I had blown up my Mae West as I went down. So I was floating. And about, it must have been 150 to 200 yards off, I could see a shipwreck sticking out of the water. And so I managed to swim slowly towards it and got on, but I kept slipping off because it was at such an acute angle. And anyway, eventually I hadn't realised then, but it had been a ship wrecked on the Goodwin Sands, which is obviously where I came down. And I sat on that for a while, and then a fishing boat came along and took me off.
So you weren't waiting long? Or you don't know?
Well, I'd been in the water, I suppose, about altogether about half an hour or so.
Okay.
And I was beginning to suffer from hypothermia. And they gave me a hot cup of half tea and half whiskey on the fishing boat. On the fishing boat. And then when we got within a mile of the shore, an RAF launch came out and I was transferred to that. Meanwhile, the hot tea on my cold hypothermic tummy had worked wonders. And luckily they had a loo on board which I retired to and I couldn't leave it. We eventually got into Ramsgate Harbour and the airman kept knocking at the door saying, "You all right?" So I said, "Yes." Anyway, eventually I was able to leave it. They carried me up the steps and a crowd had collected and they all cheered. And a dear old lady came forward and gave me a packet of cigarettes as I was put into the ambulance. And I was taken to Ramsgate Hospital, which had been terribly badly bombed. And the whole time I was there, when I spent the night there, all they could produce, the kitchen had been bombed, was a slice of bread and butter and a cup of tea. And they put me under a lot of electric light bulbs, and it must have been literally about 12 or 13 hours before I began to feel anything at all.
Did they remove the bullet from your ankle?
No, they looked at my wound and realised it was nothing they could cope with. And so I was put to bed under these electric light bulbs and eventually more or less recovered. And then the following day, an ambulance arrived at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we set off for Halton Hospital in near Aylesbury. Going through King's Langley, and I was so thirsty. I'd had nothing to drink since the cup of tea they gave me at Ramsgate Hospital the day before. And so I told the driver to stop at a pub in King's Langley and get me a couple of pints of beer. So by the time I arrived, I'd still had nothing to eat since breakfast the day before. And
so you were probably quite tiddly.
I was quite lightheaded by the time I got to Halton. And the nurse, I told the nurse I was jolly hungry, and she rustled up some scrambled eggs, which was rather appropriate as I'd been scrambled the day before. And I was put to bed with the sleeping pills and painkillers and things. And because it all blacked out, and all I realised was I had a large ward. And most extraordinary, I had a great friend called Mickey Staples, who sadly was killed. He flew into a hill into Spitfire. And we had both trained together at Brize Norton. And when I woke the next day, he was in the next bed, and we both had bullets in our right legs.
No.
And extraordinary. Anyway, the next morning the doctors were coming round, going to all the patients, and nobody came near me, and I was getting a bit worried because I'd heard of people catching gangrene from wounds and things in the First World War. And about midday, the head man, a group captain, head doctor came round and came to my bed and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Walker, sir." He said, why are you here?" I said, "Well, I've got a bullet in my leg." And he said, "Oh yes, who's looking after you?" I said, "I haven't seen a doctor since I arrived last night." And apparently what had happened was I arrived at the hospital too late because we didn't get there till about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. I'd arrived too late to be booked in. So it wasn't nobody knew anything about me. And he was absolutely furious. He really blew up. And he tore everybody on a strip. And literally within 10 minutes, I was in the operating theatre. And when I came to, the surgeon was sitting by my bed. And he said, "I think you'd like to have this." He said, "As we were prizing your ankle open to get the bullet out," he said, "your ankle, the bullet shot out and hit the ceiling of the operating theatre." And he handed it to me, and I've still got it. That's an armour-piercing bullet that came from a German Messerschmitt.
That ended up in your ankle.
And finished up in my ankle, and you can see the picture of it.
Let's just hold that up for the camera. There's the bullet.